I climbed the narrow staircase slowly, my knees groaning in protest with each step. The years had not been gentle, and at 71 the body often reminded me of its limits. The manila envelope tucked under my arm felt like it weighed far more than a few ounces of paper should. Perhaps it was because I knew what lay inside and what those pages truly meant. Hello, my dear friends. Before I begin my story, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and please give this video a like. It really helps me grow this channel and keep creating more stories for you. The third-floor hallway of the apartment building in Charleston smelled faintly of fried food and bleach. The overhead fluorescent bulbs buzzed with a relentless hum, casting the walls in a pale, washed-out light that made the place seem more like a hospital than a home. I paused at the door marked 3B. A strip of masking tape bore my son's name. Daniel scribbled in fading black marker. At 35, he still hadn't bothered with a proper nameplate. For a moment, I stood motionless, listening. From inside came the murmur of voices, followed by a burst of laughter. Daniel's deep baritone and a woman's sharper tone. Kayla, his girlfriend, the one who had decided living with me was suffocating for a man of his age, that my presence was unhealthy, that independence meant cutting me out, the one who had never held down steady work, yet somehow always had opinions about my choices, my spending, my life. I tightened my grip on the envelope. I had come because his mail was still being delivered to my house, the house he grew up in, the house I had fought for and sacrificed for. Inside were insurance forms, a credit card statement, and an IRS notice that looked far from trivial. But there was also something else, something I had uncovered yesterday while sorting through my filing cabinet. A set of documents I'd nearly forgotten existed, ones that shifted the ground beneath our feet entirely. I raised my hand and knocked, 3 firm raps. The footsteps approached, then the deadbolt turned. The door cracked open just enough for Daniel's face to appear. His brown eyes so like mine, narrowed when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "You got mail." I lifted the envelope. My voice stayed calm, steady, though my heart beat faster. "Thought you might need it." He glanced over his shoulder into the apartment before stepping out into the hallway, leaving the door mostly closed behind him, as if shielding the world inside from me, as though I were some nuisance at the door, not the woman who had raised him single-handedly after his father walked out when he was 7. "You could have called first," he said, voice clipped, "or tossed it, probably junk." "The IRS doesn't send junk, Daniel." His jaw tightened. "Fine, thanks." He reached for the envelope, but I held it back just slightly. "Aren't you going to invite me in? I drove all the way across town." He shook his head. "Not really a good time, Mom. Kayla and I were just—" From inside came Kayla's voice, pitched deliberately loud. "Can't she call first like normal people do?" The words hit me like a slap, hot and sharp. Heat rose in my chest. I stepped a little closer, lowering my tone so only Daniel could hear. "A normal person?" His cheeks reddened. "She didn't mean, next time just call. This isn't your home." The hallway seemed to tilt under me. Those words, after everything, 28 years of mortgage payments, decades of repairs, of scraping together money for property taxes, of working late shifts so the house would never be taken from us. And now, my only son, dismissing me, as if I had no claim, no right, no place. I smiled then, not kindly. It was the kind of smile that had silenced school principals when Daniel was in trouble, the kind that once unsettled my ex-husband when he tried to bluff through his lies. The smile that meant a decision had been reached, You're absolutely right, I said sweetly. It isn't my home. I extended the envelope toward him. He took it, though I noticed the tremor in his fingers. From inside, Kayla hovered by the counter, blonde hair gleaming under the kitchen light, crop top barely covering her stomach. At 23, she looked like she had never considered a serious responsibility in her life. But it isn't yours either. Daniel's forehead furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Check your mail, all of it, especially the one marked Property Deed Amendment. It came yesterday. The color drained from his face. Mom, what did you... I didn't do anything, Daniel. I corrected an oversight. I shifted the strap of my purse on my shoulder. The movement felt deliberate, weighted. An oversight that's been stealing my sleep for months. What oversight? His voice quivered, and I heard the edge of panic creep in. Good. Maybe panic would break through the fog of entitlement that had clouded him since Kayla became the center of his world. Do you remember when you turned 18 and I added your name to the deed? You wanted to feel responsible, more invested in the house. He nodded slowly. Do you also remember what I told you? What would happen if you ever decided the house wasn't your home anymore? His mouth opened, then shut. Behind him, Kayla approached, her tone sharp. What's she talking about? I widened my smile. I'm talking about the fact that when someone declares a house isn't their home, they don't get to keep living there. Kayla slipped her arm around Daniel's waist possessively. You own that place half and half, right? That's what you said. That's what he wanted to believe, I replied evenly. But ownership and legal title aren't the same thing, especially when there are conditions. Daniel's face turned ashen. They were just words, formalities. Were they? I tilted my head. Then you won't mind if I exercise my rights under those conditions. What rights? Kayla nearly shrieked. The right of reclamation, I said softly. If the co-owner establishes residence elsewhere and declares the property isn't home, the primary deed holder has the right to reclaim full ownership with 60 days' notice. The hallway grew quiet except for the faint bark of a dog down the corridor, the hum of the heating system, normal sounds of other lives, while mine shifted beneath me. You filed the paperwork? Daniel whispered. I filed the paperwork. When? Yesterday afternoon, after I finished reading through your mail. Did you know the IRS has been trying to reach you for 3 months? Something about income you didn't report from a consulting job? Kayla snatched the envelope from his hands, scattering papers across the hall as she tore them open. This can't be legal. You can't just take someone's house. I'm not taking anything. I'm reclaiming what's mine. I crouched to gather the fallen documents, stacking them with calm precision. I've been paying while you two have been playing house. Playing house? Kayla's voice cracked. We pay rent. I stood, papers neatly ordered again. $600 a month for a 2-bedroom in this neighborhood? That isn't rent, dear. That's charity. Daniel's voice finally returned, thin and desperate. Mom, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? The words tugged at me. For a moment, I felt that old pull, the instinct to rescue, to provide, to soften the blow, the same instinct that had driven me to work double shifts, to co-sign loans, to cover mistakes. But then I remembered Kayla's scorn, his dismissal, the words, "This isn't your home." The weakness passed. I suppose you'll figure it out, I said. You're both adults now, aren't you? Independent adults. I pressed the papers into his trembling hands. The notice period begins tomorrow. 60 days to clear your belongings and update your address. The property management company will be in touch. Property management? Kayla whispered. Well, I can't handle it myself. I'm just a 71-year-old woman who doesn't understand boundaries. My voice dripped with sugar. Besides, I'll be busy preparing for new tenants, real tenants, the kind who pay market value. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Daniel, next time you have mail delivered to a house that isn't your home, maybe call first, like a normal person. The slam of the apartment door reverberated behind me as I made my way down the stairs. But I didn't look back. The drive back to my house in West Ashley felt longer than usual. Streetlights streaked across the windshield like pale ribbons. My hands steady on the wheel, though my thoughts churned. I replayed the look on Daniel's face when realization struck. That mixture of fear and disbelief, when words on paper finally outweighed his sense of entitlement. It was the same expression I'd seen when he was 12, and I caught him with bills missing from my purse. Consequences had always shocked him, as though the idea of limits never belonged in his life. When I pulled into the driveway, the familiar creak of the front gate greeted me. The shutters on the house were chipped, the hedge along the walkway overgrown. I used to see those imperfections as failures, reminders of all the money poured into supporting my grown child, instead of caring for my own space. But tonight, they looked different. They looked like proof, evidence of priorities that had kept a roof over both our heads while I worked myself raw. Inside, the silence was thick. For months, I had told myself I liked the quiet. No more finding Kayla's makeup scattered across my bathroom counter. No more dishes abandoned in the sink. No more muffled arguments about money I knew I had funded. Yet what I had really felt was loneliness. But tonight, the quiet felt earned, chosen. I set my purse down on the kitchen table and took out my phone. 17 missed calls blinked back at me, all from Daniel. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't need to. I'd heard the chorus before. Explanations, excuses, promises, pleas. I deleted them all and filled the kettle with water. The house phone rang just as I reached for a tea bag. His number glowed on the caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered on the 6th ring. Hello, Daniel. Mom, thank God. We need to talk. I've been calling. I know. I was driving. Look, about earlier, I didn't mean it the way it came out. It's not that this isn't your home, you meant exactly what you said. The kettle began to hiss on the stove, and I adjusted it off the burner. Those were your words. I was frustrated. Kayla was stressed about her interview tomorrow, and you showing up without warning what interview? Silence stretched on the line. I imagined him pacing their living room, Kayla listening close, feeding him lines. She's been looking for work, he said finally. 8 months now. The market's tough. I know what the market is, Daniel. I also know what it looks like when people think the world owes them something. Mom, please, she's trying. What I don't know, I said, pouring hot water over the tea bag, is why her job search is my responsibility. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? In the background, Kayla's voice rose, urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. She wants to know, Daniel said, if we could work out a payment plan to buy out your share of the house. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Buy out my share? Daniel, I own the house. You were never more than a name on a deed with conditions. Conditions you broke the moment you left. But we put money into it. Improvements. Rent. $600 a month doesn't cover the property taxes, let alone improvements. What exactly do you think you invested? The security deposit when we moved, the utilities, insurance, the insurance I kept paying because you never bothered to get your own policy, he faltered. Mom, can we meet somewhere? Talk this through like adults? As though I'm the child? My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. You've mistaken my silence for weakness. I've let you, but not anymore. Don't hang up, he said quickly, his tone cracking. For a fleeting second I heard my little boy again, the one who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. Just tell me what you want. What will fix this? The question lodged like a stone in my chest. What I wanted was impossible. I wanted the last 8 months undone. I wanted dinners together instead of hearing about their outings on social media. I wanted respect, gratitude, acknowledgement. What I said was, I want you to read the paperwork I filed, all of it. Pay attention to the section on alternative arrangements. What alternative arrangements? I'm converting the house back to a single-family residence. No more tenants. No more pretense. You can't kick us out with 60 days' notice. Tenants have rights. You're not tenants, Daniel. You are family. There's a difference. Kayla's voice pierced the line now, high and shrill. She's crazy. Old people do this when they're lonely. She's losing it. And I hung up. The phone rang again immediately, and again, until I unplugged it from the wall. I shut off my cell. The silence afterward felt like a blessing. I brewed my tea, carried it to the living room, and sank into my father's old armchair. Daniel had always hated that chair, calling it ugly and outdated. To me, it had always been a reminder of steadiness. Tonight, I decided I would move it right into the center of the room, where it belonged. The following morning, pounding rattled my front door before sunrise. Daniel's car sat in the driveway. Kayla paced beside it, her arms flailing, her face twisted with fury. "Mom, I know you're in there," Daniel shouted. I rinsed my coffee cup, placed it neatly in the dishwasher, then opened the door just enough to meet his eyes. They were red-rimmed, his hair unkempt. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "Good morning, Daniel," I said evenly. "We need to talk. I thought we settled yesterday this isn't your home, and people don't pound on strangers' doors at dawn. I'm not a stranger. I'm your son." "Are you?" I studied his face. "Because your girlfriend called me crazy last night and you let her. Sons don't let that happen." Kayla appeared behind him, flushed with anger. "Look, we can work this out. We'll pay more rent, market rate, if that's what you want." "What I want," I said slowly, "is to stop being treated like an embarrassment. What I want is for my 35-year-old son to take responsibility, instead of leaning on me to bankroll his partner's unemployment." Kayla's lips quivered. "That's not fair. I've been looking for 8 months. When I was your age, I worked 2 jobs to keep Daniel fed after his father left. I didn't have the luxury of being picky." Her eyes welled up, but I felt no pull of sympathy. "You have rights too," she said weakly. "You're right. You have the right to live your own life. You don't have the right to mine." I started to close the door, but Daniel shoved his foot against it. "Wait, what if we apologize? What if Kayla apologizes?" I looked directly at her. "Do you?" Her jaw clenched, her voice bitter. "If that's what it takes." "For what?" She glanced at Daniel. He cleared his throat. "For being disrespectful." "I want to hear it from her." Kayla forced the words out like shards of glass. "I'm sorry. For being disrespectful." "About what?" "About calling you crazy." "Is that all?" The silence that followed said everything. She thought she could mumble her way out of this. But I was done being placated. "You can't destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt," she snapped finally. "I'm not destroying anyone's life," I replied, closing the door. "I'm reclaiming my own." The deadbolt clicked into place, and for the first time in years I felt peace settle like a quilt around my shoulders. The next 2 weeks passed in a silence that felt almost luxurious. No calls, no pounding on the door, no desperate knocks in the night. I had blocked Daniel's number after the 15th voicemail in 3 days, each message circling through predictable stages: rage, pleading, bargaining, guilt. Without that constant noise in my ear, I could finally hear my own thoughts again. I spent mornings in the kitchen, sipping coffee at the table while sunlight streamed across the worn linoleum. For the first time in years, I noticed how the light hit the glass figurines on the windowsill, scattering rainbows on the wall. Afternoons I spent rearranging the living room, moving my father's old chair back to its rightful place, sorting through shelves, tossing clutter I had kept only because Daniel might want it someday. Evenings I walked the block, nodding to neighbors I'd barely acknowledged in 15 years. That was how I noticed her, a small woman with neatly kept gray hair and a habit of working in her front garden at odd hours. She waved once, twice, then finally crossed the street one Thursday with a casserole dish in her hands. "I'm Margaret Whitfield," she said, holding the dish out to me. "From next door. Tuna noodle. I made too much." I blinked. I had lived across from her for over a decade, and yet she was barely more than a silhouette glimpsed from the window. "That's kind of you. Thank you." I also wanted to say, "I think you handled yourself very well with your son." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "You heard that? These houses weren't built with privacy in mind, dear, and that young woman has a voice like a trumpet." Margaret's tone was frank, without judgment. "May I come in?" Every instinct told me to guard my space, to keep my distance, but something in her steady gaze disarmed me. I stepped aside. She set the casserole on the counter and sat at the kitchen table as though she'd done it 100 times. "I retired from family law 3 years ago," she said plainly, "specialized in property disputes. I want you to know your documents are airtight. Whoever drafted those conditions knew what they were doing." "My lawyer was thorough," I admitted softly. "Good, because you'll need that protection. What you did was not wrong. It was necessary. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her certainty cracked something inside me. For weeks I had lain awake wondering if I was cruel, unforgiving, unnatural for drawing a line. Hearing her speak felt like cold water poured over a fever. "You don't even know the whole story." "I know enough. I know he lived in your house for years, paying a fraction of market rent. I know he chose a partner who disrespects you in your own home. I know you sacrificed, and they treated it as entitlement." Her eyes sharpened. "And I know you've been conditioned to feel guilty for standing up for yourself." Tears blurred my vision. "Sometimes I feel like the villain." "Of course you do. Mothers are told that boundaries are selfish, that saying no makes us monsters. But if Daniel had treated a stranger's landlord the way he treated you, he'd have been evicted months ago. The only difference is that you're his mother, and he assumed the rules didn't apply." I pressed a hand to my eyes, ashamed of the tears. "Kayla called me crazy, said I was having a breakdown." "Classic gaslighting," Margaret said dryly. "Discredit the person holding them accountable. Convenient way to dodge consequences." She leaned forward. "You did the right thing. The only thing that gives him a chance to grow up." Her certainty steadied me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed I wasn't cruel. I was strong. But her prediction soon proved correct. 3 weeks after the paperwork was filed, the calls began again, this time from numbers I didn't recognize. When I ignored them, the texts arrived. Not from Daniel, but from Kayla's phone. "We're homeless because of you. Daniel can't sleep. He's having panic attacks. We found a place, but need $3,000 for deposits. This is your fault." Each message cut like a paper slice, small, but relentless. I deleted them all, but the sting lingered. On Friday night, as I tried to lose myself in a mystery novel, headlights swept across my window. A car door slammed, then another, then two more. Footsteps on the walk. A heavy pounding shook the door. I peered through the peephole. Daniel stood there, flanked by Kayla, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, and a younger man shifting uncomfortably. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." His voice was raw, strained. I opened the door with the chain latched. "It's 9 o'clock at night. What are you doing here with strangers?" "This is my sister Nicole and my brother Wayne," Kayla cut in, motioning to the two beside her. "They came because they're worried about Daniel, about his mental state, after what you've done." The audacity took my breath away. "What I've done?" I said slowly. "You mean reclaiming my house, the house I've paid for while you lived rent-free?" "You made your son homeless 3 weeks before Christmas," Wayne blurted, his voice uncertain but insistent. "Helen told us how you blindsided them. No warning." "Did she also tell you she was living under my roof for 8 months without contributing? That they paid $600 a month for a place worth $1,500? That they declared my house wasn't their home?" Nicole waved dismissively. "Details. The point is, family takes care of family. You don't abandon your children." "I haven't abandoned anyone. I've simply stopped enabling them." "Same thing," she said with a shrug. The casual dismissal was like ice down my back. Entitlement ran in Kayla's bloodline, it seemed. No wonder she believed the world owed her. "Daniel," I said sharply, ignoring the others, "are you really going to stand there and let strangers lecture me on my doorstep? Let them dictate how I spend my money?" His jaw worked, but he said nothing. That silence was worse than shouting. I began to close the door, but Wayne stuck his foot against it. "Please, just hear us out. Helen's my sister. She's scared. Can't you help them with the deposit? It's only $3,000. You own a house outright. Move your foot." My voice cut through like steel. He hesitated, then stepped back. I slammed the door and bolted it. From outside came raised voices. "She's lost her mind," Nicole shouted. "What kind of mother does this?" "The kind who's done being taken advantage of," I answered through the door. "You're a bitter old woman," Kayla shrieked. "You can't stand seeing other people happy." I walked away, leaving their rage to echo uselessly on my porch. From my bedroom window, I watched them linger another 20 minutes before finally driving off, tire marks scarring my driveway. The next morning, a note waited under my windshield wiper, written in Kayla's careful script. "Mrs. Carter, since you refuse to answer calls, I'm writing to explain. Daniel is suffering from severe anxiety because of your actions. His therapist says this abandonment could cause lasting damage. We found an apartment but need $3,000 for deposits. We're asking for a loan, not a gift. We'll pay $200 a month until it's repaid. If you refuse, you're choosing money over your son's mental health. Is that really your legacy? Please meet us at Starbucks today from 2 to 4 to discuss this like adults." The manipulation oozed from every line. Medical language, guilt tactics, a fake payment plan. But what chilled me most was the signature. Helen. Not Daniel and Helen. Just her. I walked straight to Margaret's house, the note clutched in my hand. "They came again," I said when she answered in her robe. "With reinforcements." She read the letter, her face darkening. Ah, the intervention strategy. Classic manipulation. And this note, very well crafted. She's skilled, I'll give her that. Skilled at what? Financial abuse, emotional blackmail. She's probably practiced on others for years. Margaret handed it back. "The question is, are you ready to end this permanently?" The words hit like a weight on my chest. You mean, cut them off completely? No more calls, no more visits, no more games, until they can show you real respect, because that's what it will take. And if Daniel never comes around, my throat felt tight, then you'll know the truth, that the son you loved may have been a projection of who you wanted him to be, not who he was, and you'll be free. Before I could respond, a car door slammed outside. Margaret glanced at her watch. 2:00, right on schedule. Through her window, we watched Daniel's car pull into my driveway. He knocked softly at first, then harder. I stayed seated in Margaret's living room. "Should I answer?" I whispered. "Do you want to?" I studied him through the glass, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn. But when Kayla marched up behind him, he straightened, knocked louder. "No," I said. "I don't." We watched them wait 20 minutes before returning to the car, but they didn't leave. They sat there. "They won't go," Margaret said. "Time to call the police." "Police? On my son?" "For harassment. Trespassing. They've been told to leave. Better to draw the line on your terms than theirs." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked on the line. "I know you're home. Please, we can fix this. Helen's sorry. Put her on." Silence. Then her voice, smooth, carefully measured. "Mrs. Carter, I want to apologize for last night. I was upset. I shouldn't have brought my family." "What else? What? What else are you sorry for?" She faltered. "If I seem disrespectful, you called me crazy, said I was having a breakdown. Are you sorry for that?" "Yes. I'm sorry if it hurt your feelings." "You're not sorry for the words, only for the consequences. Try again." I heard muffled arguing. Then Daniel's voice returned. "Mom, she's trying. Can't you see?" "Daniel," I said quietly, "I will ask you one question. Your answer decides everything. When Helen's family stood on my porch last night and insulted me, why didn't you defend me?" Silence. "They were just trying to help," he said at last. "Wrong answer." I hung up. Margaret's eyes met mine. "Well?" "He chose her," I said, and for the first time I felt no sting, only relief. I didn't turn my phone back on for the rest of the evening. I sat with Margaret drinking her strong coffee while the light shifted across her kitchen floor, and felt a kind of stillness take root inside me. Not numbness, not hardness, just steadiness. It surprised me how ordinary the moment felt. No triumphant soundtrack, no thunderclap of revelation. Just two women at a kitchen table and a decision that would govern the rest of my life. When I finally walked home, the air outside had cooled. My porch light drew a soft circle on the step, illuminating a small scuff where the door had taken the brunt of last night's pounding. I ran my thumb over the mark and then let my hand fall away. Some things don't need polishing. They just need to be recognized for what they are. I slept deeply for the first time in months. Morning brought quiet. I brewed coffee, folded a load of towels, and watered the fern on the sun porch that was forever flirting with death. Around 10, I took out a yellow legal pad and began listing the practical tasks I'd ignored while refereeing other people's chaos. Call the roofer, schedule HVAC maintenance, meet with property manager to finalize the tenant plan in case I chose to rent the back unit again. Or not. Review insurance, plant bulbs. The list wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. By noon, I'd checked off 3 items and booked 2 appointments. At 1, a soft knock sounded at the door. Not aggressive, tentative, almost deferential. I looked through the peephole out of habit and saw no one. Then the knock came again, lower down. A delivery on the step, a small cardboard box addressed to me. No return label. For a second, my stomach tightened. a remnant of the last few weeks' constant dread. But when I lifted the lid, I found a neat row of tea tins nestled in tissue paper. A note lay on top in slanted handwriting. Mrs. Carter, peppermint for bedtime, lemon ginger for mornings that ask a lot of you. M.W. I smiled despite myself. I hadn't realized how starved I was for a simple gesture of kindness that didn't come with strings. The following days took on a rhythm. I called the roofer. He replaced 2 damaged shingles and told me the rest could hold another season. The HVAC technician vacuumed dust from somewhere I didn't know existed and pronounced the unit sound. I scrubbed the baseboards in the hallway, the kind of cleaning no one notices until it's not done. I boxed up a stack of dishes I never used, left from the years when Daniel always might come by with friends. I took them to Goodwill and felt lighter leaving the store than when I entered. The house changed as I did, subtly but unmistakably, like an old friend sitting up a little straighter. 2 weeks after the standoff at Margaret's, an envelope arrived from the county clerk, confirming the deed amendment and the reclaim provisions I had exercised. Legal language, dense and unequivocal. I placed it in a clear sleeve and filed it at the front of the cabinet, where the sight of it calmed my pulse, the way a lighthouse calms a sailor's eyes on choppy water. Daniel didn't call. Kayla didn't text. The silence didn't roar anymore. It gently hummed. One afternoon, on my way back from the grocery store, I noticed a for rent sign in front of a tidy duplex 3 streets over. A young couple with a baby waited on the lawn. The woman bounced the child while the man checked his watch. A property manager unlocked the door and waved them in. The family's faces were tired and hopeful, in that way you only understand if you've ever moved with too little money and too much worry. I carried my bags inside and thought about how many moving trucks I'd seen in my life and how rarely I'd allowed myself to think about what it took for strangers to start over. That evening, Margaret knocked with 2 bowls of something steaming that smelled like rosemary and garlic. "Chicken soup with farro," she said. "There's a cold going around." "You're going to ruin me for my own cooking," I said, ushering her in. "Nonsense. You'll outlive us all on your habits alone," she replied, waving me to the table. "How are you feeling?" "Like my spine reattached to the rest of me." I took a spoonful. "Also, like I can't quite believe it. The quiet, I mean." She nodded, stirring her bowl. "Quiet can be loud when you're used to performing." "Performing?" "The endless dance. Anticipate their needs before they know them. Cushion all the consequences. Patch all the holes before anyone falls through. It's a full-time show. The applause is inconsistent." I laughed softly. "The pay is terrible." "And the union is non-existent," she said dryly, and we both laughed harder than the joke deserved. After soup, she set her spoon down and folded her hands. "I have an invitation for you. Nothing dramatic. The Historical Society downtown needs volunteers to digitize archival materials and help prepare curriculum packets for the schools. I told them you have an eye for detail and patience for tedious tasks, necessary virtues for scanning a century of birth records and city maps." "I haven't worked since I retired," I said, ignoring the twinge of defensiveness in my own voice. "Not real work. Not the kind with schedules." "This isn't work," she tilted her head. "It's stewardship." The word landed somewhere deep. Stewardship. Of records, yes, but also of a life. "When would it start?" I asked. "Next Tuesday, 10 to 2. The coordinator's name is Carl," she said, too casually. "He's a widower. Kind eyes. Terrible jokes. Brace yourself." "Margaret," I said, half shocked, half amused. "I'm retired, Evelyn," she said serenely. "I meddle in whatever I please." I laughed until tears gathered at the corners of my eyes. When the laughter faded, I wiped at them, and found I didn't feel lonely at all. The weekend arrived. Saturday unfolded in small satisfactions. I planted daffodil bulbs in the front bed, tucking them into the earth like promises. The sun was soft and the soil still warm. A breeze off the river carried the faint tang of salt. I went inside, washed my hands, and spent an hour sorting photographs. Decades of birthdays and Christmases and first days of school. I made a new folder. Keep for me. Not for passing down, not for gifting, not for proving. Just for my own remembering. That evening, a text flashed across my phone from an unknown number. Evelyn, it's Wayne. We met on your porch. I'm sorry for how that went. Helen asked me not to contact you. I'm contacting you because I think you deserve an apology anyway, for what it's worth. I stared at it a long time. Then I typed, "Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate that." A minute later, "I don't agree with how they handled things. I love my sister, but I'm trying to be a better man than I was raised to be. I didn't know what to say to that. In the end," I wrote, "that choice is its own inheritance." A single gray bubble appeared, blinked, disappeared. Nothing else came through. It was enough. On Tuesday morning, I walked into the Historical Society right on time, a little nervous, a little exhilarated. The building smelled like wood polish and old paper, a scent I've always associated with dignity. A woman at the front desk handed me a visitor's sticker and pointed me down a hall to the archives room, where a man in his late 60s stood beside a flatbed scanner, frowning at it as though it had personally betrayed him. "You must be Evelyn," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I'm Carl. This machine and I are engaged in a misunderstanding." "Let me guess," I said, setting my bag down. "You asked it for 600 DPI and it gave you thumbnails." "Twice," he admitted, astonished. "You speak its language." "I've wrangled worse," I said, thinking briefly of Kayla and pushing the thought aside. We spent the next hour in companionable work, labeling folders, scanning brittle maps with their edges worn to lace, entering metadata exactly as the preservation guide required. There was pleasure in the precision, in the click and whir, in the clean naming convention that rendered chaos legible. Around noon, Carl told a joke so bad I had to clutch the table to keep from dropping a century-old voter roll. "He warned me," I said, when Margaret stopped in later with a bag of cookies and an expression that didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. "Who do you think warned you about him?" Carl asked, throwing up his hands. "She's a menace. We're all afraid of her." "That's because you're sensible," Margaret said, and patted his shoulder like he was both an annoying nephew and a favored colleague. After my shift, I walked slowly through the lobby, reading the plaques on the wall, names of donors and docents and long-ago benefactors. Outside, the live oaks made lace of the sky with their branches. I felt useful. I felt awake. Days slipped forward. The leaves barely admitted to autumn. In Charleston, fall is a rumor until it isn't. I replaced the faded curtains in the living room with light linen that made the afternoon sun look like hospitality itself. I rearranged books so that the ones I love most sat eye level, within reach. I oiled the hinges on the hallway closet and felt ridiculous pride when the door swung shut without complaint. One morning, I found a letter in the mailbox with Daniel's careful handwriting on the envelope. The sight of it was an ache, but not the old panicked kind, more like the soreness after a body learns to stand properly. I didn't open it on the porch. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table where I have cried and balanced checkbooks and celebrated tiny victories, and then I slit the envelope with a butter knife. "Mom," it began, then crossed out Mom and restarted. "Evelyn, I don't know how to say this, and I know you don't owe me your attention. We moved into a basement apartment 2 towns over. It's more than we can afford. Helen started a job at a call center. I took a weekend gig delivering groceries. It's been humbling. I'm not asking for money. I'm writing because I recognize things I didn't before. I let people speak to you in ways I never should have allowed. I made you small in rooms where you paid the light bill. I made your help invisible to myself so that I could pretend I had done it all. I'm not proud of who I've been. I don't know if I can be better. I want to try. I understand why you did what you did. I think I needed it. If you decide you don't want me in your life anymore, I'll accept that. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I'm sorry. I am actually sorry. Not for the consequences. For the behavior. Daniel. I read it twice, then a third time, and then I set it down. It was not a perfect letter. It avoided details, skipped over the parts of the story that would have been hardest to admit. But it was also the first true acceptance of responsibility I had seen in longer than I could remember. He had written it without demands, without timelines, without the usual tug on my conscience disguised as affection. I put the letter back in its envelope and placed it in the drawer with the tea towels. Not because it was unimportant, but because I wanted to think before deciding what it meant. Sometimes, space is respect. Margaret found me on the porch that afternoon, polishing the brass on the mailbox with a rag. "You look like a woman who swallowed a truth," she said. "He wrote," I said simply. "And?" He apologized, the real way. And nothing. That's where I am for now, in the and nothing. I gave a small shrug. He doesn't get immediate forgiveness like a prize for good form. He gets time. So do I. She nodded, pleased. Time is the only honest currency in these matters. We sat quietly, watching a pair of school children race their scooters down the sidewalk. The smaller one wobbled at the corner, and the bigger one reached out a steadying hand without even thinking. The instinct made my chest ache in a different way, not for what I'd lost, but for what I once gave so freely, the way mothers do when the cost is invisible and everything seems to grow on the tree of your own effort. Weeks passed. I continued at the Historical Society. Carl's jokes didn't improve, which felt oddly reassuring. Wayne sent 2 more texts, both simple, both kind. Margaret and I took turns cooking on Sundays, and once we tried a new bakery on King Street and declared the croissants adequate, with the air of international food critics. One evening, a number appeared on my phone I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then answered. "Mrs. Carter?" A female voice. Young, unsure. "This is Carrie. I'm the property manager for Daniel's building. Your son listed you as an emergency contact. He sprained his ankle carrying groceries up the steps. He didn't want me to call you. He told me to call his girlfriend. But the form had your number. I'm sorry if this is intrusive." For a moment, the old reflex flared so bright I could taste copper. "Is he all right?" I heard myself ask, the mother in me refusing to sit down. "He's fine. Just needs rest and ice. I thought you should know." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "But please remove me as the emergency contact. He'll provide the correct name." A pause. "Of course." After we hung up, I stood at the window, palms flat against the sill. I waited for the guilt to wash me away. It didn't. The tide rose. The tide fell. I was still standing when it receded. That night I wrote a short note. "Daniel, I received a call from your property manager. I asked her to remove my number as your emergency contact. This is not punitive. It is appropriate. I wish you a swift recovery. Evelyn." I didn't offer to drive, to bring soup, to pay for a ride service. I did the hardest thing I have yet done. I let him discover he could get through a small crisis without me. 3 months after the first day I walked into Daniel's hallway, with a manila envelope and a mouthful of resolve. I stood in my front garden with soil under my nails, planting the last row of bulbs. The air smelled like damp earth and the maritime whisper of the river. Margaret came around the hedge with 2 mugs of coffee, the kind of entry that felt more like belonging than any key in a lock. "Any word?" she asked, handing me a mug. He texted to say he got a raise at the call center, a training role. He said he thought of how many times I'd taught him to open a stuck jar by tapping the lid instead of forcing it, and how many problems in life are lids, not jars. I huffed a laugh. It was corny. It was also his. "Progress rarely announces itself with trumpets," she said. "It usually knocks like a neighbor carrying soup." I sank down onto the garden bench I'd finally bought for myself and wiped my hands on my jeans. The Historical Society accepted my proposal for a small exhibit, Women Who Kept the Ledgers. It'll feature the unseen bookkeeping from corner stores run by widows and daughters in the 1920s and 30s. Margaret's grin transformed her whole face. Of course they did. Carl said I should present at the opening. I told him he was out of his mind. He said precisely. "You'll do it," she predicted, "and you'll be good." "I'm 71, Margaret. I don't know if I need to be good at new things." "That's the best time to be good at new things," she said. "You don't confuse good with applause." That night, I set my father's old chair exactly where the light found it best and opened a bottle of wine I'd kept for years, waiting for an occasion worthy of it. For so long I had been stockpiling moments for a future that always moved an inch ahead of me. After the promotion, after the mortgage, after Daniel's graduation, after the wedding that never came, after the crisis that always did. It occurred to me, the special occasion was not a date on the calendar. The special occasion was any evening I declared myself worth celebrating. I poured a glass. The wine tasted like plums and late summer and small yeses adding up to a life. Outside, the wind threaded through the live oaks, and the house made the contented clicks and sighs of an old body settling its bones. I raised my glass to the room that had once been crowded with other people's wants and was now sized to fit my own. "To second chances," I said aloud, and the words felt neither theatrical nor sad, just accurate. To the rescue I had finally offered, to myself. On the coffee table, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "I'm starting counseling next week. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be someone you could invite to your porch someday without regretting it." I considered, then typed back. "That porch has 2 chairs. The second one isn't a promise. It's a possibility. Keep doing the work. Time will tell." A minute passed. Understood. "Thank you for answering." I set the phone down. The room didn't shift. The chair didn't roll back to make more space for him. The center of gravity remained where it should have been all along. I took another sip, stood, and walked to the window. The street held the quiet of a neighborhood that has made its peace with itself. Somewhere, a dog barked twice, and then thought better of it. Across the way, Margaret's living room lamp overthrew the dusk with a warm, square certainty. I thought about the women whose names wouldn't be on plaques, but whose numbers balanced the books, and whose signatures kept the lights on. I thought about the girls who are told that compassion means shouldering everything, and that love is measured in what you deplete of yourself. I thought about boys who become men and believe help is a birthright and not a gift, unless someone finally shows them the difference. I thought about how long it can take to learn that you are not wrong for wanting a life size to fit you. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated, don't forget to subscribe and say where you're watching from. There's another video waiting on your screen that I think will surprise you.